and welcome to the Visible Women Podcast. I'm Kim DeBrew, and along with co-host Corynne Corbett, we put issues related to diversity, inclusion, and appearance in the spotlight and examine how they impact the lives of women of color.
On today's show, we're going to talk age, style, and the power of women over the age of 50. Let's start with this question. Are women of a certain age invisible? Does the fashion industry see us? When does that begin? And what are we going to do about it? Joseph Coughlin of the Age Lab at MIT and the author of The Longevity Economy, Unlocking the World's Fastest Growing, Most Misunderstood Market, made some important points when he was a guest on the Today Show a while back that are even more relevant today. As people get older, the future is female, with women better prepared for life after middle age than their male peers. One of the greatest underappreciated sources of innovation and new business may in fact be women over the age of 50, with new ideas, lots of life ahead of them, and with the verve to get it done. And the other thing that he says is the new woman's movement is entrepreneurship. When you're young, you're willing to join a large corporation and put up with the bureaucracy. You do not have the patience to put up with that later on. By the time you're 40, 50, or 60, chances are you've raised a family, managed a home, you've gotten an education, and you have already done your corporate gig. What we're starting to see is that older women may be hitting a wall in many major corporations, and that is the corporation's loss. They're becoming engines of innovation in their own right by starting consulting companies, new stores, and online sites.
As I was thinking about this topic, Corynne, I was thinking about some of the frequent quotes that we hear when it comes to style and success. Things like dress for the job you want, or you don't have a second chance to make a first impression. And as a woman of color past 50, these expressions just do not resonate for me any longer. I am so over those moments at this phase as a Black woman, as an entrepreneur. I really don't have the energy for things that don't bring joy or don't bring others joy. And if I can't show up as my authentic self, I'm just not interested in showing up. There's a great quote by Oprah that says, when you get me, you're not getting an image, you're not getting a figurehead, you're not getting a theme song, you are getting all of me. And I bring my stuff with me. My history, my past, Mississippi, Nashville. I'm coming in with the sisters in church. I'm bringing Sojourner Truth. And the greatest thing about what I do is that I'm in a position to change people's lives. And I think when it comes to the topic of style and success, I really am looking for alignment of those two things, of the person that I am authentically and how it shows up physically. So today we're so excited to talk about how fashion intersects with the unseen market of women. Our guest is Sonya Barnes, an internationally known brand, image, and style expert who is dedicated to helping women create intentional, extraordinary lives. Full of enrichment, meaningful purpose, she has intentionally pivoted her business to help women over 50 live with substance and style. Sonya, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
When you think about your current vocation, why did you choose image consulting as a vocation?
Okay, so I'm going to date myself back. So image consulting, like I know it's 2019, but when I first started into this industry, it was 2000, or started thinking about it, it was 2000. And then in 2001, I know y'all are going to freak out, but I don't think Google was a thing. I found everything on AOL. Remember AOL? So I did some research. I was in another career, and I always wanted to become a fashion merchandiser. Now they call it visual merchandising. And so that was not an opportunity my parents were excited about. So I had to take the traditional route. And I chose fashion, not realizing that image consulting was actually a career at the time. And so then, you're thinking that 2000, 2001, stylist was really not a real term. So image consulting was, and it took it just a little bit broader because it talked about people's, not just their appearance, but their behavior and their communications as well. And my undergrad is in organizational communications from Colorado. And I thought this is a great way to merge my corporate background with my desire and interest in fashion and style. So image consulting it was. There was an association that kind of like validated my career change. And that's the path I took.
So you work a lot with corporate women, and you're based in Charlotte, but you work and travel all around the world. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so actually what happened is I came back, I studied in New York at the time under a lady who now has a full program at FIT, and I was her very first class. So I give praise to Dominique Isbach as my number one trainer. I get back to Charlotte, and I thought almost shyly, like, how am I going to tell people that I'm an image consultant? Because they really don't even know what that is. And I started working a couple people one-on-one. But then I realized that I come from a corporate background, and I knew that women in the workforce would struggle with what was then becoming a phenomenon of business casual. And so I took my training a little bit further and studied a little more, and then just kind of went the corporate route. So on a blind bid, my first big corporate contract was with GE. And so that kind of took me all over the US as a big contract. And then AIG when they were really big and legal in the US. So I kind of just traveled and took it away. And then in 2008, when the economy tanked, I had enough roots around the world through colleagues that I just took my business abroad. So I did a lot of consulting for companies over in Vietnam and Hong Kong and Singapore as well. So it worked out well for me. Still have a passion for it.
Yeah. And just a follow up to that, and when you're working, if these corporate accounts, what would you say your primary focus is when working with women in corporate environments?
And working with women in corporate environments is to have some presence. You hear the term executive presence. And oftentimes they think of males, but I talk to women about being seen, the power of the unspoken. Power of the unspoken is your appearance, your body language. That's the first thing. How your hair, you present your makeup or minimal makeup or whatever, but just having presence, like the importance of presence, and then the importance of establishing credibility as a female was very different than males.
So to follow up on that thread, so I've been thinking a lot about presence in my work as a leadership coach, and really the intersection of what it means for women of color particularly to exhibit that presence, right? When sometimes the norms are culturally or really trend towards the dominant culture. So when you think about what the stretch might be for women of color in the present space, what do you notice about what it takes for them to get there? Are they there? Is it more work than you might think of from majority groups?
I definitely think women of color, I've actually had this conversation with my son who's saying, what has this whole privilege thing, white privilege. But women of color definitely have to work a little smarter than the dominant group, as you call it. And the fact that they have to be more intentional and more strategic in their personal brand. So that's where I'm really going to brand development. And so I have a process that I work with when working with a female or any client, but specifically a woman of color, to saying you have to be the Apple or the PC of your company. And that means consistency, being consistent. And I call myself a strategist. Like, we have to strategize, because as much as we like to think we evolved and we've come away and the conversation is definitely out there, it's so true that there's still a lot of work that, has to be done that we're not overlooked. After a while, it gets old to be the only fly in the milk, so to speak.
So what do you think clothes say about an identity when you're working with particularly a woman of color? And let's talk about now that you've moved into women over 50. What are you helping her to build? What kind of message is she sending?
So you nailed it right at the end. So I always say clothes are a component because what I'm helping them build is an appearance. So when I think of image consulting in my traditional sense, and even when I talk about it now, it's the ABCs, and it's appearance, behavior, and communication. And so communications is both verbal and nonverbal. And now we've expanded it to this whole social media part of an image brand. So when I talk about clothes, I'm talking about the overall appearance. So it's your hair, your makeup, your smile, a lot of the nonverbals. So what I take them through is to have them say, what do you want people to get when they interact with you? Like, give me 3 brand messages or 3 attributes that you want people to know, like whether it's confidence or professionalism or charisma. I mean, those are great and people will get that from you. But how do you make those words show up on an individual? What does charisma look like? And it's not like the miniskirt. What is professionalism? So it's all, I take it through a process of, by the time they get those 3 brand messages, it's easy for me to go into that closet and I'll say, does this look like the brand you want to represent? And it's like, nah, not so much. All right, easy. So it's very collaborative effort. So it's brand messages and attributes, because clothes are, at the end of the day, I say this often, it's fabric and thread. Now, whether it's Gucci's fabric and thread or Target's fabric and thread, it's all fabric and thread. So it's, what do you want to represent? What represents your particular brand message? So clothes play a big part of the overall branding component, but it's really the appearance, and that's the hair, the eye contact, the makeup, the details, the grooming. If we can just get grooming, sometimes we've done quite a bit of elevation in image. So clothes are part of the appearance component of branding.
When you think about your work, what's bringing you the most joy these days?
I am loving that. I had a client today. She worked me to death, but I loved it. She was a mature woman. I polled all my clients over the last few years. My average age is 56. This lady was over 60. And I love seeing the joy when I know this sounds odd, but I coach them in giving them permission to proceed, to be their authentic self. And so giving them permission and them accepting and saying, this is really who I am, and let's just collaborate and make this, happen. And it just brings me joy. She was in her 60s maybe, but she was, besides tired, she was in awe of what we had put together for her. And it was working weekend. So it brings me joy to grow people and empower and educate my clients. I would say, if what brings me the most joy is empower and education. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you said that she felt she got permission to be her, because if we're talking about the audience that you are empowering have gone through the follow the rules stage, so you're giving them permission to to leave the rules behind.
Right, break out your rock. Yeah, like, do you? So I do. And when you get to a certain age, I still have some clients that are in corporate, but they're like itching and itching. I was like, you don't want to be in costume. You don't want to be in costume. Like, cash pursuits are like, been there, done that. So, and there is a thing about appropriateness for the environment.
Right.
I can respect the appropriateness for the environment. But even within that, it's like you have permission to be freedom of full expression, even in the title position that they've given you. So I'm like, honey, you're in control. This is your world. So you have permission to proceed as much as you want to. And I love like passing out the permission slips, I call them, like, you can do this. Let's do it. it's all mindset. I think it's like we've been conditioned, especially in my generation and the generation above us, that, we follow the rules. I'm so over the rules.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you, Karen. I'm over the rules.
Now, I thought it was really interesting that I'm going to harken back to an interview I did with you years ago where we talked about where glitter belongs. And, everyone that's going to listen to this is not over the age of 50. And there's been a missing link in terms of education on what you wear to work, period. And if you could say a little bit about club attire versus work attire, I don't care if you're working in the club, but it's still your job. There is a difference.
If you wear it to the club, don't wear it to work. I just still believe that. And I think that media has kind of skewed that because there's so many images in terms of reality shows and, celebrityism, so to speak, that I'm like, they're paid. These people are paid. Everybody on television is paid, okay? Unless they're being interviewed. They're paid people. You're trying to get paid and move your pay scale up. And so that is not a benchmark. The media is not a mirror for what's appropriate. And I just do believe that. We can't baseline the media as, oh, well, so-and-so's wearing that and that's quote unquote cute. I feel about the word cute. That's cute. Or, oh, that's hot. I'm like, you're professional. So there should be a demarcation of what's professional and appropriate for the environment versus what you wear to the club. No, glitter is for the club, people. I don't care if you're 22, 52, 72, wear the glitter at the club if that's where you're going.
So I wanted to just sort of look at the issue of success and style from the industry standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about whether or not you believe to what extent ageism exists in style and what you think might be kind of an effective way to push back against it, whether it's voting with your wallets or something else.
I think that ageism in fashion is making a slight pivotal shift because so I have two things about that. You have great Instagram and fashion influencers who are of a much older age, which is great. And then you have like the cover girl, Mae Musk, who's in her 70s, who is like, my girlfriend, she's like, who is the blonde lady? I'm like, that's Elon's mother. So there's been a pivotal shift in ageism as being seen because we're working longer and our buying power is a little bit more powerful and more intentional, more investment pieces than more trends, relatively speaking. So I think that it's taking a shift slightly. My big concern on the second half of that is the dominant culture for ageism in fashion is pretty highlighted from and I've been researching this recently. And I think I even reached out to Corynne. I was like, where are we over 50 who are having an influence and we're not 22, 32, didn't work for a fashion magazine. So there's a dichotomy in the fact that ageism is taking a shift in the right direction, but it's predominantly the dominant community, as I'll use your terms. But then my question is like, they're all size 2s and, look similar, and they have permission and have completely expressed freedom of full expression, which is great. I love them dearly, but there is still a missing gap. And that's a gap that I'm working towards. We just had this conversation this week. I'm like, where are we? Where are we? And I'm not starving myself to be a size 2. I like a biscuit every now and then.
So let's talk a little bit about two things I want to talk about. Let's talk about brands that you feel are getting it right.
Mm-hmm.
Getting it right, not necessarily. So you're talking about in the present standpoint. So in the corporate environment or in creating a brand for yourself as a woman, brands that get it right, that are good to include in your wardrobe
Mhm.
if you're working in that environment. And then secondly, I want to talk about your upcoming event.
Yes. So you just finished my my master's program, and my thesis was on inclusivity and challenging Gucci, who's on top right now. I mean, prior to this bump in the road, being the one to break the mold, to really step into inclusivity in sizes or expanded sizes like past an 8 or 10 in the fashion world. If you're a 10 or above, you're considered plus size. I was like, okay. So I did a lot of research on a lot of brands and websites. And I will say that a company that has been really great is 11 Honore. The CEO has done amazing. He's heavily in my thesis and conversations. And so he's pulling designers to create clothing for sizes up to 22, 22, 24. And so now we have, where Tracy Reese and DVF were like inclusive to maybe a 12, 14. We have, oh God, let's see, Michael Kors. We have some mainstream designers who are coming in and creating true designer luxury clothing for women. Because my fuss was, okay, the money for, let's say I've got a client who's size 16. So you only saying that she's okay to buy a Gucci shoe or a handbag and a scarf, but not the clothes? So you're going to be discriminate on what money you want from her? Like, seriously? So 11 Honore is doing a great job. I know that Anthropology just launched an expansive collection called A+, which I thought was kind of catchy. And I love that. Bowden does a great job. Ann Taylor definitely goes up to a 16 curvy. So there's some brands who are like, okay, the plus size industry is a $27 billion industry. And that's just of last year in the statistics. $27 billion. So literally I was sourcing something for a client who she's really like a 14, 16. And I thought some really good names that I just can't call out. I'm like, I love the clothes, but I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? You only go to a 10, 12? Like, come on. It's the average size of women today, like 12, 14. And that's not big. So we have influencers in fashion who are curvy girl influencers, and I think that's great. But some retailers are really slow. I love 11 Honore. There's Eloquii. Torrid does great for streetwear. Anthropology just launched A+. So there are some brands who are really getting it right. And I can definitely go to, like, if you're, tall or curvy, long, tall Sally, they're always great for, sometimes with expanded sizes, your feet are a little bit larger or not. And then J. Jill for the petite plus. So I really have sourced it out. So those are just some right off the top of my head that I think are amazing. But Patrick Hernig at 11 Honore he's nailing it. They walked the Fashion Week this year for the first time and said this is the new runway where it's all inclusive size models and in like real clothes, not like Saks that we used to have like 20 years ago in the back of the store with just a little few racks. I see a lot of them coming on, but a lot of them have a ways to go. So we'll see.
Great. So you have this upcoming event in the Queen City. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So a good friend of mine who's also over 50, we're actually 3 days apart. She's like, I really think we should do an event because we have this conversation. And, we're two different sizes. And I said, there's a conversation that women of over 50 would feel comfortable in. And so we're hosting a Teapots and Polka Dots event where we talk about style and being intentional in life and, all things that we have in common more so than we don't have in common. But it's really big on life and style, coaching and etiquette, and just, having a great time. So a lot of luxurious, gift bags for other women over 50 who may not get to showcase their wares, but really talking about what it means to embrace this thing called ageism And, you hear people say, oh, 50 is the new 30. I'm like, no, baby, 50 is the new 50 and 60 is the new 60. Like, we've paid our dues. Like, I'm not trying to go back to 30. It was great, but let's just kind of embrace. And a lot of people, or a lot of women, still have a problem with becoming older. And I'm like, what's the alternative here? Like, you can age well and with grace, ease, and poise, but I'll take it any day right now. I feel like I'm, relatively youthful and young. So, and just really changing the conversation and then having a voice about how we express, these boutiques, oh, we only go to a size 8. I'm like, seriously, really? An 8? So just having, a voice in the atmosphere, even more so, especially in the Queen City.
It sounds like a great in-person event. And I'm curious, how can folks who want to really just know more about the work you do, the ways that you could be a resource, whether...
So you go to my website. I just sent a little e-blast out. It's www.sonyabarnesinternational.com. And I started this blog that I'm geared toward it being the blog for women over 50. And so I've gotten a lot of feedback on the topics that people want to hear about. But SonyaBarnes.com is the website, or Sonya Barnes International. It all gets you there. And then you get a free opt-in for 50 things every fashionable woman over 50 knows about style. And then you'll get a blog notification once a week.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is great. Let's talk a little bit before, as a follow-up. What is your feeling on the role of trend in your wardrobe as a 50-something, of a woman of a certain age? So is it being trendy? Is it being on trend? Is it?
So I have a couple of thoughts about that, because there's a fine line in being trendy and then, I don't want to say on trend, but being modern. So when I literally look at fashion, I look at the cycle of it, where when it comes on the runway, it's like this part of a tiny part of the pinnacle of the triangle. And that's a trend, like it's new, oh, this is coming out, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll see how long it lasts. If it's 1 to 3 years, I'm like, not going to invest a lot of money in that. Like, I might do a casual purchase. If it sticks around more than 3 to 5 years, eventually it's going to become a classic. So that's like camo. Camo, we thought, was like a minute. Camo's been around like 11, 12. It's here to stay. It's become a classic trend, so to speak. So I don't want to look like the girl in the magazine, but I watch to see how long something is going to stick around. And if I want to be on trend, it's not something that I'm going to spend a ton of money at. So I may go to, a flagship store or even a fast fashion and just buy the piece to see if it's, if I love it, if it works. And then if it sticks around, I'll be like, I might spend a little bit more money. But the key with not being modern or on trend is it can age you and you'll look dated, like very dated, like the safe and secure, and, and consistency is crucial, but you don't want your clothes to date you. So you want to be modern and on trend. So on trend to me means modern versus trendy, buying like the latest and the greatest, which we don't know when something hits the atmosphere, whether or not it's going to sustain.
I have one final question for you as we wrap up this episode. So our listeners are all ages. They're our age, in our 50s. They are younger. And I want to say that the work you're doing is accessible and is work that people can enter from all different ages. So if you were going to give some tips to somebody who wants to follow in your footsteps, for whom this has maybe been a dream or something they didn't know was possible, what would you say might be some first steps to get started?
I would say first, congratulations, because I actually had someone call me this week in their 30s who I'm doing a custom online program for. And I'll say, now, are you serious? Because is this a business or a hobby? And if it's a business, we have to invest in ourselves. I'm going to say, for me, unlike the dominant culture, I just don't get general purpose entry into the high world of fashion. Do your homework and invest in your education so that you can walk the walk. And not only that, and just not just look the part, but you can talk the talk. Like you understand the business component. And then everybody didn't start out great. Like we all started from the beginning. And just be gentle to yourself and know that this is the beginning, and it's a process, not an event. It's just like any other business. My goodness, you have it. People want to come in and they want to be like celebrity stylists. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. What do you know about color? What do you know about body? What do you know? What's your sourcing vocabulary? Like, what do you know? And it's a lifelong learning process. So if you don't love it, then it's just a hobby. And that's quite okay. But if this is something you want to do, immerse yourself in the world and business of fashion, because there's two components to success. And one is the business component, and the other is the educational component of knowing where to go, where to source, what's available, how to put it together. So there's two components, but I love having people come in to the industry. I love it. I like to see people. I like to grow people, and I love to see women do well. I really do.
Well, that's a great place to end. Loving to see women do well.
I do. Women are the future.
Yes. And what's wonderful about this is knowing that we can use our knowledge to, just like you said, Jill, you don't want to always be the only one in the room. That gets tired fast. What you want to be is the bridge that helps everybody else get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we want to thank you so much for joining us, and not only being a bridge for others to get there, but for those who are successful, being kind of like the light that shows them that it's okay to be themselves.
It is. Like there's only one of you. It's not dress rehearsal. We don't get do-overs. This is it. This is your Academy Oscar award-winning performance. So, live it up.
That's our show for today. Look for the latest installment of the Visible Women podcast every other Wednesday, where we'll tackle issues and experiences that relate to appearance, diversity, and inclusion that are relevant to your lives. Check out our website, visiblewomenpodcast.com, where you can find out more about the episode and follow us on our social channels. Make sure you join our Facebook group to participate in discussions about our latest episode. Until then, here's to all the visible women out there. Never forget that we see you.